Hi, I'm Dan Lagani with Silver Solutions. Welcome to this edition of AgeWise, the show to make you smarter about the things you need to know as your parents and loved ones grow older. Today, we've got Dr. Deborah Serani as our guest. She's a psychologist, an author, and professor, and specialist on the subject of depression. In fact, her book, Depression Later in Life, An Essential Guide, is the perfect backdrop for where we sit in the middle of the holidays and still dealing with the impact of the COVID pandemic, social isolation, and the issues most relevant for our seniors population. Dr. Serani, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for inviting me today, Dan.
Your book covers the issue that you describe as late life depression. What is that, and how is it different than what we know as depression with people that are not necessarily seniors?
Well, depression can occur at any range and at any age. And the issue at hand here is that late life depression presents and looks very differently than it does in younger adults. What ends up happening with young or childhood depression, genetics and socially learned issues tend to be some of the causes for why depression occurs. But as adults get older, 65 plus, we tend to find that it's much more vascular involved, more neurochemically involved, and environmentally involved due to loneliness and social isolation. So they are very different origins, and they also present very differently too.
So, as a family member that may have an older mom or dad, what are the key signs that we should be looking for?
Well, there are three things to look for in your loved ones or older family, elderly friends. And it is behavioral symptoms, physical symptoms, and cognitive symptoms. Now, some of the behavioral symptoms are not like in younger individuals where they'll say, I feel sad or I'm feeling depressed. Behaviorally, what we see in seniors is a very out of touch, almost detached experience. They don't know they're depressed. They may be irritable. They may have apathy. They may lose concentration. They may have aches and pains. They may have memory issues. So these symptoms that have to be looked at are very different. So that's why it's helpful to talk to a general practitioner or even better, a gerontologist, so they can help you better understand what to look for in your loved ones.
From a practical perspective, how should we be thinking about sorting out the issues that present themselves, as you said, very specifically as depression versus just general aches and pains, for example?
Well, one of the first things that everybody should do when we're talking about any mental illness or any well-being concern is to get a medical evaluation. First and foremost, get a checkup from the neck up and down, because certain illnesses can look like mental health issues, particularly with depression, anemia, diabetes, hypothyroidism. So it's important to get our elderly loved ones to the doctor and make sure they get checked out from inside, outside, blood work, urine, everything. And then once we know that everything is in order, then we can start to assess the geriatric pieces of mental wellness. And there are a lot of online screenings that loved ones can look for. Just type in geriatric depression screening. And they're there because we want people to have access to these tools. You do the screening, you find the score, and then you can talk to your general practitioner about finding a mental health professional. And that mental health professional particularly has to be specialized in geriatrics.
Dr. Serani, no doubt 2020 has, with a COVID pandemic, shaped up to be a year unlike no other in recent history, to say the least. How have you seen it in your practice or even through conversations with colleagues, creating even greater issues for our senior population that we've specifically asked to shelter in place and to have as little contact with the outside world as reasonably possible?
Well, loneliness is an epidemic of its own, even before COVID. And we know that as we age, social isolation and being part of that silver wave can kind of create this withdrawal from society. Many individuals, as they age, tend to feel forgotten. What studies are showing already, we're 6 months, 9 months into this pandemic, is that the social isolation is causing extreme mental health issues from anxiety, depression, and even physical issues. So what What we need to do for our loved ones who are older is we need to make sure that we can stay socially connected to them and they can know their value and importance and feel connected.
One of the things that we see in our business at Silver Solutions and that we're called in to help with are very cluttered environments or at times even hoarded issues. Is there a connection between depression and hoarding?
Well, not everybody who is depressed will hoard. However, we do find a causal relationship between those who are involved in hoarding experiences. They often do struggle with an untreated depressive disorder. So, yeah, it's a difficult balance because hoarding, which is an entity of its own, it was part of obsessive compulsive disorder, but now it's its own particular diagnostic issue. We have to be very careful about how we tend to these depressive issues and how we help these individuals connect to other aspects of their life and not the materialistic things that they think they need.
We're at the time of year that, at least on paper and in the media that we all look forward to, which are the holidays. What is it about the holidays that seems to spike or trigger greater bouts of depression generally, and I would imagine among seniors as well?
Well, there's an interesting fact here, Dan, is that what tends to rise during the Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year season are feelings of loneliness. Depression itself doesn't escalate during this time, nor is it a time of worry for suicidal thinking. It's actually, those rates are actually at their lowest. We worry, and the science tells us that come spring, that's when we need to really look out for our loved ones who are seniors when it comes to depression, when it comes to perhaps end of life issues. The feeling of being socially connected or the nostalgia that can come with the holidays can serve as like a buffer to those who are feeling loneliness and depression. But the interesting thing is, by saying that, I'm not minimizing the fact that there are people who struggle greatly during the holidays.
Depression and the subject matter that you spent your time on professionally isn't just a professional issue. There's a personal connection for you too. Could you share a little more about that?
When I was a very young girl, I didn't know I was depressed. And at age 19, it got very, very bad with a suicide attempt. I got intervention and I discovered that I had a depressive disorder. And it struck me as odd that I didn't know more about it or my family members didn't know more about it. So as I decided to continue in my training in mental health, I decided to be very forthright and open about being somebody who struggled with it. It's a little bit more acceptable now to hear professionals talk about their own personal experiences with any health disorder. But for a very long time, it was seemed to be taboo or just not something anybody was comfortable with. So I thought it would be very helpful to talk about what it's like to be a patient, a person who has depression, and also what it's like to be the professional treating the disorder. So my dual experience, I've tried to be a teacher about it, make it a teachable moment. So that was my goal in writing all these different books about depression at different ages.
What's interesting about your background, between being a practicing psychologist, a professor, and an author, is not only have you found time to write about your chosen profession, but you have nonfiction books as well. The latest one that I've seen is The Ninth Session. Talk a little bit about that book.
I've always been very creative. One of the things I did as a young kid to kind of ease my depression was I just would lose myself in writing stories. And that tool became just a continued hobby. So I wrote a book about a case that a psychologist has to really choose what the right thing is to do. Do you do the right thing because it's morally correct? Do you do the right thing because it's ethically correct? And it's got some suspense and just allows me to be a little different in my writing style. It was a fun endeavor.
It sure sounds like it. Dr. Serani, let's cap off with three things that would be a great takeaway for anybody that's concerned about an older parent or a loved one this holiday season to be aware of. What are three things that we can do to make sure that mom or dad are doing well, not just physically, but emotionally?
Well, I think we need to make it a point to stay connected, and not connected in every now and again sense. If your parents are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, I almost feel that the older a parent is, the more daily contact you should have with them. And I also think with this daily contact, it should be visual. We know that the vascular issues and the deterioration that can come with certain cognitive decline, it's wonderful if they hear your voice, but it's even better if they see you. So you might have to teach grandma and grandpa or mom and dad how to use technology. But my first takeaway would be to make sure that you're connected on a daily basis. The second thing I would suggest is to make sure their needs are being met. So many of us are in shelter down or on lockdown and not able to kind of get the things we need. So I would inform others to make sure that food and supplies are readily available. And I would also instruct, as a third takeaway, that it's important to remember to value, not just be in touch with your older, elderly loved ones and not make sure their needs are met, but also find out who they are. There's so much that when I work with seniors, they'll say things like, I really love when my granddaughter asks me about what it was like in my life. There are stories untapped and untold. And one of the last stages in life that we have is the ability to share these very important and unique stories. So find out more about your mom and dad. Find out more about grandma and nana. It's a wonderful way not only to stay connected, but for them to have meaning and express certain amounts of nostalgia that are mood lifting for them.
Dr. Serani, what terrific advice, and thanks for making it so easy so that laymen like myself can understand as well. And thank you again for joining us today on AgeWise, Dr. Deborah Serani, an expert in the subject of late life depression. If you like this episode of AgeWise, share it with your friends and tell others about it. And if you'd like to find more episodes, visit us at silversolutions.com, click the video tab, and you'll see all of our past shows. For all of us here at Silver Solutions who work hard every day to make your parents' lives better as they age, I'm Dan Lagani. Be well and be safe.